You're listening to the Business Consulting Buzz podcast at www.consulting-business.com. Hi everyone, welcome to another session of the Business Consulting Buzz interviews. Today I'm happy to have Chris Goegan. Did I pronounce that correct, Chris?
I'm close. Goegan.
Goegan.
Yeah.
Okay. Goegan on with me. Chris is a Canadian that escaped to sunny California. He's a marketing consultant with a focus on the online world and has generated over $65 million for his clients in the last 10 years. Today I'm looking forward to have Chris share his story with you. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Hey, Michael.
So let's start off with something that really blew me away when you told to me for the first time. And that's that before becoming a consultant, you worked in sales for a period of time. And during that time, you made over 100,000 sales calls. Is that really the number?
Well, accurate to the exact, like one number, no, but it's pretty darn close. I calculated out, and it was over 100,000 cold calls that I've made.
Wow. So I guess my question to you then is, what did you learn from all those calls about sales? You mentioned to me at one point, something about kind of the high pressure versus resistance and so on. But really, what did you learn from making all those calls?
Well, the biggest thing I learned, Michael, is that cold calling sucks. and then beyond that, it's just the whole philosophy. What makes the whole selling process easier is if you get good at qualifying people and just taking down all resistance, letting them feel in control of the whole process, and making it easy for them to buy.
Okay, so you just mentioned that cold calling sucks. A lot of people feel that it's still a necessity, in certain business environments. Why? I mean, were you not successful at it? Why do you say that it sucks? I mean, what's the alternative?
Well, I was very successful with it. At first I wasn't. I was extremely unsuccessful with it, and it was horrible. I hated it. But then, eventually, you stay with something long enough, you figure it out, and you get good at it. And so I'm not against cold calling. I think it's a great source of lead generation and a great way to get leads and clients. It's just a matter of, is it the best use of your time?
Right.
So in other words, are there better ways to have clients come to you rather than you just having to hammer phones all day long?
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes good sense. Are there any, is there a tip or two that you could offer just around cold calling? If there's people right now that are, that are making those calls that need to do that, is there just one thing that maybe you could share that you kind of learned, when you look back? I know you're saying that you started off being unsuccessful with cold calling, but really was able to make it very successful. Looking back, is there one thing that helped you to bridge that gap?
Yeah, a couple mindset things that really helped is, first of all, just getting clear on what my goals were and just making activity goals. So say, for instance, today I'm going to make whatever your number is, 10, 20, 50, 100, whatever it is, calls, and forgetting about the results of those things, and just basing how you feel about yourself based on whether you hit that goal or not.
Right.
So it's if your goal is to make, say it's 10 cold calls, get those done, very first thing in the morning. Brian Tracy wrote a book about this, I think, a long time ago called Eat the Frog or something like that. It's if you know you have to eat a frog in a day, is it better to wait till the end of the day to eat it or just get it done at the beginning of the day and eat it?
Right.
And this is coming from I used to be a big time procrastinator. So, that was a big emotional thing for me to overcome. But just setting a goal, say, okay, every day or, pick certain days I'm going to make cold calls, and on those days I'm going to make X number of calls. And then just make the calls. And then, you make your 10, 20, 50, whatever the number is calls, you feel good about yourself. If you don't, then it's okay, well, crap, why didn't I, make that number? And then, initially just forget about the results. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive because everything's based on results, but just. Yeah,
but I can see how powerful that would be because, most people start off not with setting the goal of just getting something done, but of actually, in the case of making cold calls, you're always thinking about the results, right? And so when you get rejected, you feel, you feel down. There's obviously different people deal with it in different ways, but that's usually one of the biggest obstacles of then, continuing and moving forward. And what you're suggesting is don't worry about the results. Obviously, you want to do a good job and you want to see results, but to get going, put the focus on just getting the calls done and not really worry about what happens during the calls. Just kind of focus more on the action as opposed to the results at the at the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a saying
Powerful.
there's a saying I picked up over the years that said, like, anything worth doing is worth doing crappy until you get eventually figure it out and get good at it.
Right.
So,
I like that. That's a great lesson to share there. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. And just the other point on cold calls is just like approach them just like you're talking to like a friend's at a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons. You know, just like don't try to be someone you're not. Just, you know, approach it just like you're talking to a friend, and then obviously have like some you know, like a general like benefit question, you know, that you ask them initially. So, you know, those are the two big mindset points.
All right. Well, let me get us back on track here
Yep.
because, you know, I'm not really doing a very good job here of guiding the interview the way that I was planning. But this, just what you mentioned was so, I think, such a powerful idea and concept that, for me at least, you know, I could see how that can be applied to not just cold calling, but a lot of different things just with regards to productivity. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit for everyone listening because I think that there's a lot of value there. But, all right, let's get back to this. And speaking of back, where I want to go right now is to first find out a little bit more about you and what you were doing before you actually got into the consulting world and being a consultant. So you were in sales. Can you just tell us a little bit about kind of your journey to the point of starting to get into sales, or sorry, to get into consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually started off, if you wind the clock back a little bit from there, it started off in engineering. I have a degree from Kettering University. It was General Motors Institute when I went there. Okay. And my degree is in mechanical engineering, with a minor in business and electrical engineering. And I started off working for Ford Motor Company. And I would get thrown into like all the crappiest areas of the plant. I worked in an engine plant, and since I was a new kid on the block that they'd hired, there's a cereal long time ago called Life Cereal, and the commercial was like, hey, let's let Mikey try it. He'll try anything. Yeah. If you're old enough to remember that, that's kind of how it was with me when I was working at Ford. I'd get all the crappy jobs, like, hey, let's give it to Chris. He'll do anything, you know, and of course I would, because, you know, I'd get fired, you know, if I didn't perform.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I got all the crappy jobs, and also got all the cool high-tech jobs. Why do I mention this, as far as marketing goes? Well, as an engineer, I learned how to go in to a manufacturing plant, and find where all the problems were, figure out what was causing the problems, and start putting fixes in place, and also putting like measurements in place, like for everything. And so I could sit back at a dashboard and kind of like, you know, see how things are going in the key areas and know what needs to be improved and what doesn't. And that was really a powerful concept that, you know, played out into sales and marketing, because it's sales and marketing. It's about knowing a process and then looking at different steps in the process and to see, you know, where you're good at and where you're not good at, and focus on the biggest opportunities. So from engineering, I jumped into sales just for, you know, pure selfish reasons. I wanted to get married at some point and have kids and give my wife the option of staying home. And engineering, there just wasn't enough money in it for me. So
right.
So yeah, got into sales. You know, was bad at it. You know, had some really great mentors over the years that had helped me, and, you know, eventually, like, you know, figured it out. And then, so the sales, along the process of learning sales, I was so bad at it, you know, to begin with, and it was really like a struggle. And this one guy who was training me at one time, Jeffrey Hansler, he said he actually enjoyed like watching me struggle because it was amusing to him. And so he kind of like helped me just learn a lot about that. It's not just product knowledge. It's about, you know, knowing people and why people do the things they do and behave the way they do. And so he taught me, you know, basic people skills. And if you don't, you know, understand people skills, there's a great book called Sell, Little Red Hen Sell by Jeffrey Hansler. I think it's probably the best book I've ever read on people and understanding why people buy and the different personality types. And
can you just repeat that name again for everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's Sell, Little Red Hen Sell.
Okay.
By Jeffrey Hansler, Hansler. And if you want to understand like people and why they do the things they do, it's a phenomenal book to read. It's a very short read too.
Right.
And so, you know, my journey into consulting came, you know, after, you know, banging the phones, you know, doing 100,000 plus cold calls, having, I don't know, several thousand, you know, face-to-face meetings, interviewing over, gosh, I don't know, 8,000 or something like that, business owners. I just didn't like cold calling, and I wanted to like just turn the table and have people come into me.
Right.
And so when I just looked at, the principles that was working really well when I had an interested prospect and meeting with a, business owner, took what worked there and just applied it to marketing. And, and I found out, like after time, it's like, as someone across, probably a lot of same things or people that, you're familiar with, and people listening to this will be familiar with, people like Dan Kennedy and, Perry Marshall,
right.
People like that, where, they all basically like were marketing like the same way, using, lead generation pieces and stuff like that. And that's basically how I'd always sold. And then when I started marketing, that's how I marketed. And then, when I started like kind of learning more, it's like, okay, well, hey, these guys, it's working for them as well too. So
So Chris, let me just ask you. So you're in a sales job, right? You went from working at Ford as an engineer into sales. You're tired of making, all the cold calls. You're kind of ready to go out on your own. What is the first thing that you do now to start, generating business for yourself and working as a, independent consultant?
So the very first thing I did, or the very first thing I'd recommend for people to do?
Wait, so they're not the same thing. Okay, so how about we cover both? What did you do, and then looking back, I mean, what should you have done differently?
So what did I do is I I went out a little bit naive, a little bit over optimistic about the work it would take and the time it would take to have a thriving business going.
Right.
And so I would encourage people to keep their 9 to 5 going as long as they can while they're building their consulting business or whatever their business is on the side until that's producing some revenue, because or at least make sure you've got a big enough nest egg so you can invest in marketing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's good advice. But so what did you actually do? I mean, when you went out and you now finished working as a sales guy, how did you get your first client? What were you actually doing? Give us a little bit of an insight into that experience.
Sure. I'd always been really good at relationships, and in sales, I always focused on the relationship, not on a transaction.
Right.
And so when I went off on my own, I had a small handful of people who I'd developed good relationships with over the years. And so I just, I actually like talked to them, told them what I was thinking about doing, before I got off onto my own. And, I just ran it by them, and they thought, hey, yeah, it's a great idea. It was basically like testing my business, seeing if it would sell or not, because I was taking clients where I was already selling successfully to, and my whole purpose was like, if I tell them about this, I wanted to hear them say, yeah, Chris, that's a really good idea, and by the way, can I hire you to do some work for me? Because if they were like good prospects for me and good clients for me, if I told them what I said I was going to do, they said, yeah, it's a great idea, but they didn't want to hire me, then I had a business problem.
Right. So you were doing this while you were still working in sales.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're kind of testing the waters, keeping a bit of a safety net, and then that led through those conversations to potential clients.
Yep. Absolutely. And I just made sure that it wasn't interfering with what I was doing in my sales job. So.
Right. So let me ask you this. That was now how long ago was that since you've been, a consultant and
since
out on your own?
Yeah, so that was about, gosh, I don't remember, 10 years ago? Something.
All right. So 10 years, obviously a lot's happened from 10 years ago until today. When you look back at your career to this point of being a consultant and running your own business, are there maybe, one or two things that really played a role of, helping take your income or the number of clients you're working with to a whole new level?
Yeah. And this probably won't be an answer that you'd expect to get. I actually started listening to my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I kind of get these ideas in my mind, and I really sell myself on them, and I think how brilliant I am and what a great idea it is. And so in the past, I would make mistakes of not gaining wisdom and perspective from people that really wanted to help and wanted to see me do well, especially my wife. And so she's got great insight, and she's great at seeing landmines. I'm great at seeing opportunities. She's great at seeing landmines. And so it took me a while to clear the wax out of my ears so I could actually listen to her. And so when I actually listened to her and listened to her viewpoints objectively about potential problems, and then, act on them, then...
Can you give us an example of, something maybe that you were all gung-ho about, but your wife was saying, hey, Chris, watch out for this or that, or, can you share one example with us?
Yeah. In fact, not too many years ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. I'd had like a good measure of success, with helping clients and helping them market their businesses. And then, I got this wacky idea in my mind that I want to be an information marketing guru guy.
Okay.
and I had, somebody, telling me that, yeah, your stuff is really good. You'd be really good at it, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking with my wife about it. She's like, Chris, she goes, I don't think you should leave your core business. The core of what your business is all about is like, working with people, helping them grow their businesses to sell, your information. She goes, what is great. It's solid. And she goes, you're excellent at helping people. She goes, but I don't think you're quite at that point where you should be, jumping into the information marketing world. And, and I'm reading everywhere, all these different newsletters saying you got to get into it, you got to get into it, you got to get into it. Well, for my specific situation, the timing wasn't right for me to get into it. And so I kind of jumped in with 2 feet. I neglected the core of my business, which is, consulting, helping clients grow their businesses. And, I didn't do too well starting off in information marketing. And, it was a, different world. I just, all of a sudden realized, you know what, I'm not really geared up for this right now. And if I would listen to my wife, gosh, there's, months that I wouldn't have lost, had I only had the wisdom to hear what she was saying.
Right. Okay. So really, you're saying that to that point, you were maybe a bit closed and wouldn't really consider other ideas from people. You would run with an idea if you had it, but one thing that really helped you was gaining a bit of perspective and considering, thoughts from your wife or other people that you respected, to, I guess, gain a bigger perspective in making decisions.
Yeah. And Michael, I just want to I can't state how strongly enough how important that is, because I used to run off of my gut a lot. My gut's really telling me this. I pray about it. It's like, I think God's really telling me this. And so I would act off of feelings way too much. And what it did is I quickly realized that, feelings and emotions can be betrayers of us all and make us lose the good, which we should be doing, and take us in directions that we shouldn't be going. And so I went from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum to when I'm now when I'm looking at doing things, I'll obviously, I'll think about it and pray about it, talk with my wife about it. And then I've also got, almost like a mini board of directors where I bounce things off of. And I've got a coach that, I bounce things off of just to make sure that my head's on right. And, and I'm not going off of some crazy gut feeling. So getting wisdom, I can't tell you just how vital and how important that is to short-term and long-term success.
What kind of results have you seen from implementing, taking that approach in your business? I mean, has it increased your income, or what are the kinds of results that you've seen from doing that?
Gosh, yeah, my income has increased dramatically. The types of clients I'm working with is completely changed. The value of, my clients, has changed from, maybe a couple $1,000s a client to, $20, $30, $1,000 to, 6 figures for clients, and also looking at some, potential 7-figure, deals with some clients. And how I approach, selling to clients, changed greatly as well too. Basically what it did is I stripped away my narcissism, and and it was just a really good, like, humbling experience for me just to understand that, I really don't know everything. There's some things that I'm really good at, and there's, like, areas where I'm not good at. And so it really helped me understand that. And so, not seeing it as a weakness, but seeing it, as a strength where I could just focus more on what I'm good at and then have this perspective to help me.
And that's so key too, right? Is focusing on your strengths rather than on your weaknesses.
Yep.
Is advice that I've always heard before, and it makes a lot of sense. All right, well, so you were just talking about the size of the deals and clients and projects that you're working with. I know that you took one company from doing about 6.8 million to 15.2 million in about 2.5 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and what you were doing for that client?
Yeah, they were a manufacturing company, and they were already successful. They were actually already at about $15 million, 15 million in that range, and then they lost some big clients due to attrition. The product lines just went away, and so they needed to fill it in. So when I started working with them, I looked at, well, what are these guys actually really selling? They weren't selling their actual physical product. It's like they sold peace of mind, the whole thing, so that they would manufacture parts for companies like Oakley and a bunch of medical device companies, and they really sold peace of mind. That basically we're going to get your part to you when we say we will, at an agreed upon price. Doesn't matter what it takes. If we have to deliver stuff at midnight, whatever, we will. And so once I understood the psychology, going back to sell a little and sell, once I understood the psychology of why people buy, then it really helped me look at, okay, what are their core strengths? This company's core strengths is working with. What do the clients, target clients, what are their core things that they're looking for, and got rid of a lot of people that it just wasn't a match, and then just only focused on marketing and selling to the clients where what they really wanted was a match with the core competencies and core strengths of what this company could deliver, and then completely changed how we started relationships with clients, changed the value proposition of how we started our initial engagement with them, and made it just a much more relaxed pace, much more comfortable for clients, for the prospects to open the door, let us in, starting to work with them, and then just giving us more and more and more business. So the growth was it wasn't meteoric. I don't know. Anything over 2 syllables is hard for me to say.
Right, I know what you're saying. It wasn't like it came from nowhere. It was built in from before, but now you pretty much helped to bring it back because it had disappeared.
Yeah. So for instance, first year sales, we did brought in an extra $100,000. Not a big deal, not a big deal at all. They're wondering why they hired me. It's like, just be patient. Second year, it was $2.5 million. So 100,000, $2.5 million, and then by middle of the second quarter, we had the business had doubled.
Right.
So so just having, that's another thing too. I think people lose perspective on how long it takes to actually really grow businesses till they're actually producing large, significant volume of business. Instead of looking at 30 days, 90 days, you got to have a longer look, a year, 2 years, 3 years perspective.
All right, Chris, that's thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
That experience and story. We have a few questions that have actually come in for you, and I'd like to get your answers on these. This one is from John, and John says, what is the best way to obtain permission from clients to use significant engineering projects in marketing pieces? And you're the marketing engineer, so what are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, good question, John. So working with clients, how do you use them as examples? Well, the best way is always to talk to the client and see if it's okay if you can use them as an example. And a lot of times people don't want to use specific examples with them. In fact, most of my clients, they're paranoid of other people learning what they're doing, and because they don't want their business to to go away that we
Right.
work so hard on. So what we do with them is basically we take their case study without divulging specifics about the company, the industry, the product, and sometimes not specific numbers if they don't want. So meaning it'll be hard to find, what company.
Right. So you're giving a picture, enough of a case study so that people can see the types of results that you're able to generate without divulging any, information that your client doesn't really want to share.
Yeah, exactly. So you
Okay.
don't want to say, work with John Smith at ABC Corporation and yeah.
Okay. Good advice. This one's from Sal. He says, Chris, as a marketing consultant, how do you come up with your consulting fee and an additional fee for the marketing that they decide to do with you?
Yeah, great question, Sal. My gosh, that's that's taken years of work, and a great piece of advice for that is obviously start off like I initially start off selling my services for like dirt cheap, and then all of a sudden I'm like, why am I charging that? That's ridiculous. I need to raise the price. And, and so for every market, there's sweet spots, for there, like what you should be charging and how much people are willing to pay. You definitely don't want to give things away for free. I never start an engagement off for free with a client. I don't believe in free, and clients don't typically appreciate or listen if everything's free.
Right.
So a good thing is, Sal, is to get with somebody like Michael or somebody to go over specifics of your situation and like knowing the like how much your clients' annual sales are. And look at the prices that you're charging. Sorry, it's not like a real, direct do this, but you really need, information on your specific situation in order to really give you a good number. But typically, you just start off with something, and then if you're selling it without getting any resistance, start increasing your prices until you have resistance. And once you have resistance, tighten up how you sell it and keep increasing your prices.
Right. Good advice. All right, Chris. For today's action bite, we talked about you sharing a little bit about the engagement process and how to sell what you're selling. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. Cause like one of the biggest problems I see with consultants, is not knowing how to sell what they're selling. Like they're really good at the deliverable, the actual work that they perform for their clients. There seems to be like a lot of people struggling on the front end, how to sell, what they're selling. So it's easy. Like for instance, I'm working with a client right now. He sells a product that's in the tens of thousands of dollars, and we went over like how he was selling it. So it's basically going from like a phone call to a meeting to a contract. And so if you have like a big step like that, if you're selling a big ticket item, if you're selling something, $100, couple $100, no big deal. But the higher the ticket, the more touches and the more steps you want to put in there. So what you want to do is you want to like make it like a greased slide. So, your initial meeting, with them is to get them interested in climbing up to the top of the slide. And then you want to have like a small dollar, and what I mean by small dollar is relative to their gross sales. So, like if company's doing $50 million, a small number might be, $10,000-$20,000. If they're doing, 50,000 in sales, then, a small number might be a couple $100.
Right.
So you want to like pique their interest, in the initial meetings to get them to want to give you like a check for a small dollar amount to start them down the slide, so you can start demonstrating value that you can actually like help solve the problems. And then after you do that, then you come back around and sell, like bigger packages and longer term commitments.
So, in that case, what you're suggesting is, even if you know that you can help a client with a much bigger issue that they're having, or do a lot more work for them, you're recommending that at the outset you don't pitch that whole piece. You start off just by maybe presenting one aspect or one smaller issue that you can help them first to prove that you can do what you're saying that you can do, and just to get the relationship started.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I've also learned that I don't really know everything up front. I can analyze the situation company pretty quickly, But, if you look back at your client list, and clients that you've done work for, is there clients that you wish that you knew more stuff up front before you, went into some like larger packages with them? So, and clients really appreciate that. It's like, it's like, I could sell you, a big package for, whatever, $50,000 package for a year. But I don't really know. And this is like something I say to clients is like, look, I don't really know if we're a good fit for each other. It's like, I'm confident I can help you based off what you told me, but, it's like, instead of like getting married, let's get engaged and kind of like make sure that the relationship is right. Make sure, you like me, I like you, and you feel very confident, in me long term. So rather than me like, asking you for a big dollar commitment, let's just start off with a small dollar commitment, and then, and then if it makes sense, then we can, look at something bigger after that.
That's great advice. All about building the relationship and the trust, indeed. So,
yep.
Thanks for sharing that, Chris. Again, really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous, sharing with all the listeners.
Oh, you're welcome. And Michael, thank you so much for thinking of me and allowing me to help provide some perspective.
My pleasure. For more interviews, articles, and resources on consulting, visit Business Consulting Buzz at www.consulting-business.com.